Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, step into our guest's enchanting world that crosses genres like mythology, fables, fairy tales, mysteries, and science fiction. He crafts captivating stories that transcend age barriers, mesmerizing readers with timeless narratives rich in wonder. His journey, marked by an insatiable thirst for knowledge and boundless creativity. All this plus more. Please welcome a new friend to our show, author of Tales from the Cryptids series, Samuel DenHartog. Samuel, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. I'm happy to have you here, man.
Thanks a lot, Diego. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah, and as I was talking about earlier in the pre-interview a few minutes ago before we started recording, I had a little bit of an idea and I started digging deeper. The amount of books that you've written. Great stuff. A lot of different genres, I would assume a lot of different characters and creatures to keep everything in line. Let me ask you this. So since your books, they span across many subjects. So we're talking sci-fi, Western, pirates, fairy tales, you name it. You're doing these things. How do you shift your mindset and writing style when transitioning between vastly different genres like that?
To me, I think that's one of the most fun things about writing is being able to shift to different genres, to learn about whether it's the cryptids, to learn about different specific cryptids. You know, when have they been seen? When have they been witnessed? What is their backstory potentially? Think about that. And then maybe, you know, suddenly I'm shifting over to writing a book about ancient Egypt, or a Western book. So it keeps it exciting for me as an author to be able to, I like learning. And so with each book, if I can learn something new, then that helps, me keep my excitement going so that I'm able to produce something that the other people then in reading them will be able to learn new things as well.
And I can only assume, what was that? Was that the plan the whole time? Normally an author, they'll start with one thing and they stick to it for a while, and then they shift here and there, but you seem to, you're hitting every spectrum. So what was your first series like? What did you do the first time?
My very first book was actually a little bit shorter than a lot of mine now, about 25,000 words. And it was just called After We Are All Gone. Sort of, the planet ended, not so going into so much as how it ends, but how it evolved over the course of 5,000 years, 50,000 years, 500,000 years, going on that. And then I did one about an AI rebellion. I did one about, so I started off with several sort of dystopian or futuristic novels. It was really by about the second book that I realized, hey, I really like this. This is what I want to do. I wasn't always writing books. I used to write computer programs and make video games. But in writing them, if I only wrote one genre, then I would get bored. A lot of times I can do about the most 3 in one genre before I have to switch to a different genre. I just feel like I'm losing my enthusiasm, my steam. Like if I wrote a 4th book of that same genre, it probably would not come out very good because my mind itself wants to switch. So I like switching genres. I like switching, like in the Tales of the Cryptid series, for example, I wrote those in first person from the point of view of the cryptid, which in reflection, I'm not sure was the perfect choice. Maybe later I'll explain why that was, but I like writing in first person. I have a Forge Your Own Path series, which is sort of like the old Choose Your Own Adventures, where you get to pick all these different paths. So that I get to write in the second person. Everything's you. That can be challenging sometimes. You never want to make it, not for any political reasons, but you don't want to make it a specific gender because you want both a female or male reader to be able to enjoy the book. So you always has to just be you. And then all the books that the majority of my books are written in the third person. So some of them are taking inspiration from old tales that have existed, like Grimm fairy tales or Arabian Nights, and reimagine them with more details and added dialogue and characters. And then a lot of them are just taking ideas that come into my mind, or even in the Tales of the Cryptid series, it was actually one of my readers that inspired me to get started with it, that said, hey, could you write some books about cryptids?
Well, and we're definitely going to get into the whole thing with cryptids here. So you mentioned a couple of things as you were telling us about Choose Your Own Adventure. When I was a kid, those were pretty big books, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I used to cheat because
like you read through, find anything that you like, and then figure out what choices you can take to get there.
It's like, I ain't dying today. So I used to cheat, and I mean, at that time, those types of books were very entertaining. It actually kind of helps you with decision making. I think when you're a kid, this kind of helps. And then when I got into video games, the same thing. I don't know, was it a Commodore 64? They had a Hobbit game.
Right. My first video game I wrote was on the Commodore 64, and it went on Quantum Link. It was actually a text adventure. So it takes the idea of text and games together. And I actually got into the #1 spot for a couple months on the Quantum Link service.
You see, a man after my own heart, because I was in that game. So it came with the game. I think it was like 3 or 4 floppy disks. For those who've never seen a floppy disk,
right?
Go look it up. It's very amusing.
The 1541 load quote 8, like $ quote comma 8 comma 1 to get the directory of them, all that stuff.
Yes, and back then you had to really work at playing these games. So terribly difficult game, the Hobbit game. But it also came with the book. So I mean, at least you get to read the book. That was a lot easier than the actual game itself. So where am I going with this? So then we move on to, I think after a Commodore 64 years later, it was a 486 before the Pentium. And
okay, right, to an IBM compatible PC.
Yeah, I think there was another game. I don't know. A friend of mine had it. It was about a mafia game, and you had to choose what you wanted to do to rise up in the ranks, or if you went wrong, you always got shot. Something always happened. So when you were talking about that, it's like, man, I was just, my mind went going back. So what in this age, what made you go with the whole choose your adventure path?
Well, I think going back to you as a kid, I love those books. In the 80s, I was actually, and so I thought I want to try writing one of those. That wasn't, that was probably 40 books in or something into my writing books or whatever. It wasn't in my first series, but I thought I want to try writing one of these, and I really enjoyed it. One of the things that amazed me, so I actually bought a box collection of Choose Your Own Adventure books before I started writing mine. I did just to kind of look at it. I thought, feel a little inspired again. I was amazed how tiny they actually were. Like how, like in my mind, I hadn't seen them probably for 15 or 20 years, and in my mind they were like this thick book full of lots of things, but they were actually all fairly thin. So one of the fun things with mine is I'm able to. Those are the only books of mine that I don't do paperback versions, and most I have hardback. I only do ebook versions on those, so that it's all just links kind of that you're clicking on. I could change it into pages, but I'm afraid people wouldn't buy them just because some of them do end up being much bigger books than the Choose Your Own Adventure books as a kid. To me, I look at them now and I think kids could love them, which I would totally hope they're encouraging lots of teenagers to read, as I enjoyed them when I was younger. And I think for adults too, they, particularly as you're an aging adult, maybe they can really help your memory sort of, like, because, as you work through the past and make the bad choices, you start to remember, and then, okay, that's like you have to start remembering things as you go through it. And then on my books, a lot of times there's several different adventures in the book, different successful paths and things like that to try out. So if you really start reading through a lot of the book, you could end up with a lot of things in your memory, which I could imagine for somebody, struggling with that, maybe it's a good way to exercise their memory a little bit. And so I think they could be enjoyed easily by teenagers or by even older people that just, try to enjoy the stories.
I loved the hell out of them when I was a kid. And I think I'm probably going to start doing that now just for the nostalgic purposes. And also, just to get the reading bug back in me, because sometimes you read a certain amount of books and you take a little rest, start all over. But I'm going to go back one more time talking about cheating, and I don't recommend. So when I was playing this game, I think it was Master of Orion or anything by Sid Meier's, Civilizations, right? So point where you got to make he was great games that you had. You get up to a point where you have to make a decision. So before you make that decision, you save the game, make it. If you don't turn out so well,
you can always go back.
So I mean, I could talk about. I love that. I could talk for hours about Sid Meier's Civilizations, and I don't even know if they still make them, but if they do, I don't know if I could handle.
I think they either just came out with or very soon coming out with 7 maybe or something. Like yeah, they do continue to make and advance them and change things, but in some ways, you always feel like the classics, you know, maybe Civ 2 or something, but you feel like the early ones were just as good as it could get. But I have played 5 and I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, I don't remember where I left off because then I got into the Final Fantasy ones, and then I dropped off after that. I did other things. Games became too complicated for me. I'm not gonna lie to you. And with your writing, did you start at a young age? Because I think sometimes either that's what you chose to do, or it kind of came later on in life after you do have several careers.
Right. No. For me, it's actually I just amazingly when you look at the amount of books I have, but I started at the very end of November 2023. So like, before that, for my entire career, I've been a computer programmer and developing video games and have my own video game company developing video games. I had always given my team the entire month of December off. It's just something I did in my company. I always said, if we don't have it done by December, it ain't gonna matter. Right. So I did that in 2023, and I wrote my first book, and then I enjoyed it so much. By the second book, I decided, no, I enjoy this so much more than making games or doing programming, and I've just stuck with it since. I read about a guy, I think it was like Ryu Inuki, but basically he had written 1,300 books and he only started writing when he was 41. He was a thoracic surgeon after that. He's a Brazilian, and he's the one who's wrote the most amount of books ever. And he actually wrote 999 books in his first 6 years, starting in like 1986. And then after that, in the last like 30 years since then, he's done another 300. So he obviously slowed way down on his pace from his first 6 years. But I kind of saw that and thought, well, if he can do it, maybe I can too. And so I've just set off. My goal kind of in my mind is to write 1,440 books in 12 years, trying to write 10 books a month. So far, I'm still on target. I've got 163 books, but with where I'm at month-wise, that's I should have ended March with 160. So I'm 3 books ahead of my target.
How many so far?
163.
Where do you find the time?
I don't know, during the day.
I'm just saying, yeah. I mean, that's
my biggest difficulty in life is trying to find things to keep my wife busy so she can leave me alone and I can write books. But
you know, it's not a bad strategy. Same thing goes with podcasting as well. So with that amount of books, so you know, let's just go through it with Tales from the Cryptids. Were you always interested in folklore and cryptozoology, paranormal? Is that something you recently got into? Is that something you've been into for a while?
Well, that was interesting. I was very interested in mythology. I would say I started my mythology set and my fable set in some ways more for me than my readers even. Like I was excited to study the mythologies of mythologies all around the world. And so when you look at that set now has 19 books. And then I did my fables books, which were fables, and I focused on doing it per specific country as well. Like instead of combining a bunch of fables together from all over, and I have 23 of those. So I guess I've liked sort of mythology and fantasy, but Cryptids itself, I have to be honest, it was one of my readers that said, Todd Carter. I had asked my readers in just January of this year, I said, hey, you know, I'd like to write things you guys like. Give me a few new ideas. And one of the ideas that came out of that was writing about cryptids. And at that point, I knew about Bigfoot and the Yeti, but that's about it. Like of my first 6 books, which I have Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, I'd heard of a Chupacabra, of course. I live in Mexico, so that's popular, but I didn't know tons about it. The Mothman, the Jersey Devil that I've written about, and the Big Gray Man, which is actually the Big Gray Man of Ben McDo, which is a Scottish one. Those 3 I didn't even know 3 months ago. So that's why I said with every book I get to learn, and even the ones that I didn't know near as much. But I didn't know the Mothman at all, and or even the Jersey Devil, which turned out to be, you know, as I was doing my research, these are among the most well-known cryptids. So I wouldn't say I was incredibly versed in cryptozoology or anything like that before I started. But I'm enjoying the experience, and I'm enjoying trying to think, how to write a book from the viewpoint of the cryptid itself, which kind of, lets the reader think about them in maybe a different way than they do when a lot of the books that are out there are more about hunting them or trying to see them or catch them. My books, I'm trying to write more from the point of view of the cryptid itself.
I was just thinking about that because normally is a monster hunting book or something happens similar like that. Either they're hunting them, they're being hunted by it, or somebody turns into a werewolf. But you rarely see it from a cryptid's point of view. And I'm kind of like you when I started doing the podcast not long ago. While I didn't know, I'm into UFOlogy, paranormal, cryptozoology, you name it. It's what the show here is about and the experiences. But every once in a while, you start learning about new cryptids, new things. And if you don't mind, because this is actually the first time I've heard about this one, but the big gray man, what is that?
He's sort of like a Bigfoot, but he's more seen in the mist, seen in the shadows. Like they never even see him quite as furry. And it's one of the things I noticed. This is where I said, I don't know if I knew now what I knew then, would I have chosen first person point of view necessarily, because you get into the Bigfoot, I made my Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, and then the Yeti is in the Himalayas. And so this one's in a mountain called Ben Macdhu in Scotland. The thing is they're all sort of Bigfoot, like, as I call them, wild man type creatures. And so that's where I wonder how many, initially I looked at this, the reader gave me the idea, and I started doing research, and I'm like, wow, there's, 50, 100, I'm going to be able to do tons of books in this series. But then I realized a lot of them, even though their location is different, there's a lot of Bigfoot type creatures that are all over, Europe, the US, the earth. But how many times can I tell a story of a creature that's in nature, that's maybe hunted by people, that's doing these things regardless of, where it's at, differently, before it starts to feel like I'm just telling the same story over and over again. Whereas if I had done it from third person of the 100, you could be telling more the story of the people that are trying to hunt it instead of just the creature itself, maybe.
And when you were doing a lot of the research, you mentioned the readers were giving you pointers, hey, cover this person, cover this cryptid, this monster. Have you looked into some of the stories of people who've reported to have experiences? Did any of that bleed into the books?
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. My first two books, not as much. The Bigfoot and the Chupacabra, it's more just their stories, and a fictional story just based on, characteristics of them or things like that. But the rest of the books started with the Mothman in particular. If you're going to tell the Mothman, you want to really tell the book in the late 60s, at the time of the Mothman, where it was located. And so even all of the interactions that are documented with the Mothman, they're in the book, but telling about those interactions with those same people, but from the point of view of the cryptid. So I like to fit those in. The same thing with the Jersey Devil. Once you get into like the 1830s, he was supposedly born in 1735. But once you get into the 1830s or so and beyond, then there's a lot of documented encounters. And so in my book, I was able to make up a few encounters between when he was born and he like disappears for 100 years. So I get to make up those encounters, but then all the encounters after that are really much more based on actual encounters that have been documented. The Yeti was a little different. I put him in Tibet, in the Himalayas, and so part Tibet, part Nepal. But like when the Dalai Lama escaped from Tibet, he helped him through the mountains for that 6 or 8 weeks or things like that. Like I try to, mix the cryptid in with actual history of the area or things like that have happened. And with the big gray man of Ben Macdhu, most of the book is based up on, the documented encounters that have happened. The Jersey Devil has a few ratings. These newer ones are just out, so I don't have enough feedback yet. I know my first two, where I didn't link it quite as much to actual encounters, have been rated very well so far. So I got to see if tying it to encounters actually makes a better book than just doing something that's a little bit more purely fictional.
Because I'm actually on Amazon right now scanning through the book releases for that series, and it's one of those things where people can really like a book, and some of them are kind of not into writing book reviews or giving ratings. I think some people are kind of scared by doing it because maybe they fear that somebody will give them negative feedback. Not the author itself, but if I were to do a book review and somebody would disagree with me, some people will be like, man, I don't need that kind of smoke. But Yeah.
All of my books, every Sunday I give away at least one, or like this Sunday 3 books, depending on how. But I give away all of my books at least once after they're first published for free. And yeah, I would say reviews to orders at least, but some of these people might just be sort of collecting them and not always reading them, so it's hard to tell. But yeah, I usually get about 1 review per every 100 orders, which is, as an author, that's probably the like. Not that it's but it's. I wish I had more reviews, but I try to let all my reviews come as they will, so that way I can tell what my readers actually, what they like, what they reviewed the most. It's weird talking about like my science fiction books get reviewed a lot, so I keep trying, but they generally average about 3 stars. They're not my best rated books, but they get the most reviews, so I figure maybe I should keep trying. Hopefully I can figure out how to write one that'll be a 4-star science fiction book eventually, but people definitely read them, or at least they like to review them. And yeah, so it's kind of a funny thing, but yeah, getting reviews is probably, as an author, one of the hardest things to seem to make happen. Post on Facebook and I'll get 80 or 100 comments. You can probably see that sometimes, but then the book will get, like thank you, I love your books, this or that. On Facebook they respond to me a lot, but then on Amazon I'll get 2 reviews.
I mean, it comes with the territory, my friend, but that doesn't mean people aren't reading, as you said. But I think
Right.
we have 6 books in the series so far with the cryptids. And are you going to be doing more cryptid related books? I mean, is there one that you think like maybe I should have wrote one about this one?
I don't. I definitely want to do more. I already even had one of the readers today saying, when are you going to do your next one? I just came out with these. So I want to do more, but that's where I'm actually right now at a point where I need to do more research, because I need to find a cryptid where I feel like I can write about it and not have a story that feels like I'm just telling, another story of the creature in the mountains or whatever type of thing. I like my first ones because they don't all feel like that. Like the Chupacabra is very different and the Jersey Devil is very different. But as I look at more cryptids and I start to look at them, I really like, how am I going to tell this and really have it be that much different from what I've already done, which is what I didn't anticipate when I first started, because there are so many cryptids out there. But how do I tell? I need to find another cryptid where its story grabs me in a way that I can think, oh, I can write this and have it be something new that really adds to the series.
Right, but I mean, it's one of those things. Like as you've learned, as I've learned, covering these type of things, it's limitless. It's endless amount of stories on cryptids, monsters, folklore, you name it. We're talking about land ones. We're not even talking about ones that are in the sea or in a lake or in a river. So I mean,
right,
the material is out there, and
yeah, because I mainly wanted to tell of bipedal cryptids that, like, I could do the Loch Ness monster, but I thought, she's always in the lake. Not that that's impossible. I did write a whole book about, from first person point of view of an octopus. But yeah, I like the ones that are on land more, that can interact with humans a little bit more.
And I get it, because there's only, unless you're, I guess, a pirate or a ship captain somewhere in the ocean, where you might run into a kraken, a mermaid, or some sort of sea serpent, then we got something.
Right. Now in the Jersey Devil, there is actually a mermaid, and this is from an actual sighting. So it wasn't something I just made up even. Like, there was a sighting on a ship where he had went to the Jersey shore, and a mermaid came out, and they even like kissed or whatever before she went back in. So that is in one of my chapters.
See, now, I downloaded some of the books, and now I'm enticed to read the Jersey Devil one, because it has a mermaid in it. You don't hear much about mermaids.
Yeah, it's just one chapter. That's definitely the most violent. It is amazing for the 6 books how, like the Yeti, not that it doesn't have a little violence from humans or whatever, but it's all in many ways peaceful. And then the Jersey Devil is definitely my most violent one of all. The Chupacabra is pretty violent as well, but they vary in their themes and kind of how they reflect that. That one definitely, I would just say, be prepared for a lot of things to be murdered. In theory, just to be fair, they say there's no record of the Jersey Devil actually ever killing anything. But that's where I took the years between 1735 and like 1835, where there was no more documented encounters. And I had it do a lot of killing before it got to the point where it decided not to do killing. And then once I get to the regular encounters, it doesn't kill anymore.
I mean, there are a lot of deaths attributed to cryptids, but not necessarily the cryptids don't do it. I think it's when people go hunt for them, That's when they get in trouble.
They get in hunting accidents or something.
You read my mind. Yeah, they're either gonna hit their head in a log or fall in a cave, or it's just it's the dangers of going out there and exploring. So with the multiple type of books that you have covering different subjects, what are the biggest challenges when you're balancing multiple projects across various genres? How do you balance that out? Do you have to like sit down and clear your mind? Okay, I'm done with cryptids. It's got to be pirates on this one. Once you're done with pirates, well, now it's gonna have to be dragons or something like that. How do you clear your mind?
I would say, I don't know, maybe a Red Bull. Red Bull and a little bit of smoke, maybe. But yeah, generally, so far, it's probably when I first started, I wrote an update article at about 3 months, and I was really worried about, am I going to run out of ideas? This was probably, so I was about 30 books in, and I thought, how am I ever going to possibly come up with 1,440 ideas? Now I'm not so, I actually, even though I'm 163 books in, I feel less worried about that right now than I did a year ago. Even like I don't know, I'm always reading, always thinking of ideas. Like I've still got a list of ideas. Well, of what I want to work on next. Right now, I'm working on a series of books where people go and they interact in things in history. So it's more like historical fictions. Like I say, I don't know. I don't worry too much about what's going to come. I just know that something, like I'm always going to think of something next. And most of it's a matter of discipline. And that's where this Ryu Onuki guy, he would always say it's 2% inspiration and 98% perspiration. So the hardest part is just saying every single day, I'm going to write and I'm going to write all day long. And like I said, I was a programmer for years. So every single day, there was nobody, you can't go in, you can't say, I'm not going to produce code today. I've got writer's block. Like if you get writer's block as a programmer, you're out of a job. Right? It's over. So you just, every day you got to say, I'm going to write, I'm going to produce, and you get up and do that. But I enjoy it. I think that's what makes it so fun. Like for me, I love it. I could go back to programming. I'd make money instead of lose money. But I love each book. I love learning. I love having to read. I love having to do the research to figure out what I'm going to write. And it's so much more fun to be able to talk to people about the latest book I wrote or what I'm doing as a writer than saying, I wrote this logical algorithm that helped the computer be able to recognize that this particular image had a character in it or something like that. Like that's or I'm doing an electronic medical record system for doctors. That's boring. Like
Yeah.
It's neat to me, it works, but that's not something you can go talk to people about. But as I write about all these books, I'm learning about all kinds of things that I myself, as I said, I didn't know about all the cryptids. So I'm just constantly learning new things as I'm writing and having the time of my life.
And it sounds like you are, my friend. Now, as I look on the website, I said we covered multiple genres, but you wrote one biography, and we're talking about Isaac Newton. So, out of all the people in history that you've read about, maybe looked up to, or have interested in, why Isaac Newton? What made him shine the most?
I think he's probably, to me, he's the most brilliant mind of all the brilliant minds in history, and particularly in doing his biography, kind of redoing it. You get to see, like not only was he the inventor of modern calculus, but he did all these experiments with light. He invented calculus because he was trying to explain gravity, and not just, as we think about it, everybody thinks, the apple falls, gravity, like he's the first one to notice it or something. But he was actually developed calculus to help him do theories for universal gravity and how the universe moved, not just here on Earth, but the planets, the rotating, everything. So I just found it, when I was younger, I used to like to read books about a lot of scientists, Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton. I guess I like the different astronomers. I like Einstein stuff. So that was when I felt like I actually did one other that I have a link called Fantasy Books, and it's the 6th fantasy book. And I actually wanted, so that was my first one I did. The reason it's in fantasy books is even the Isaac Newton one was a little bit fictional biography, but staying very close to the truth, but maybe adding in a little fictional conversations or things like that. So I thought about moving this one now that I did the Isaac Newton one, The Journey of Johnny Appleseed. I did that mainly. That one I wrote because I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. until I was 18 years of age. But we have a Johnny Appleseed Park. Every year they have the Johnny Appleseed Festival. It was sort of a big thing. And when I went to go write about Johnny Appleseed, I realized that there were things known, but not as much known as I thought there was. So definitely in the fictional biography of Johnny Appleseed, I had to invent some stories based on things that would seem like the things that he sort of did, but not having enough details to really do a full biography. Became much more. It's much more of a fictional biography even than the Isaac Newton one was, and so that's why I put it in the fantasy category.
So for guys that grew up in our times, we've heard of the name Johnny Appleseed. I think that kind of name has kind of faded out as the decades go by. If you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about who Johnny Appleseed was?
So he was a man, I believe he was born in Massachusetts, and he ultimately went out to Pennsylvania area, started working on farms. At the times in the past, apple cider, and this is what I didn't realize either, apple cider was actually a huge part of the pioneering type times, and that's what they drank. They drink it, we think of beer or water or things like cider was what their drink was for almost 80% of what they drink, even to some extent. So it was huge. And so the government would actually give you some money if you would commit to taking up to 100 acres of land and doing apple orchards. So he went around, got a big bag of seeds. And this is why it's important about the cider. Though the trees that come from seeds actually create apples that are called spitters, because if you bit into them, you'd spit it out because it's sour. But they make great cider. I didn't know this because near where I lived, there was a tree that was supposedly planted by Johnny Appleseed, and it created very good apples that we would use in pies and everything. So I don't know if it was planted by him, but apparently to get that type of apple tree, you got to graft it from another existing apple tree that's type. And that's not what Johnny Appleseed did. So he would travel around. Now, he was a vegan, which is strange in his time. He had some religious beliefs that were kind of a Christian sect, but he didn't believe in hurting animals even. That's why he became a vegan. So he would travel around planting the apple trees, have good relations with everybody, including the Indians. That plays into my books. People would say when he'd show up. Now, what happened is then Prohibition came. This was right at the end of his life or right after his death, but they cut down. The government went in, the FBI, they went in and cut down huge amounts of apple orchards. So it's very hard to actually find any trees that are apple trees that are actually Johnny Appleseed apple trees anymore, because the government cut them all down during Prohibition because they didn't want people making cider out of them. So those were all things I learned about Johnny Appleseed. And I just think of him as a guy with a tin pot in his hand that walks around. And he did walk around with a tin pot in his hand. A lot of times he would use a coffee bag for his shirt even. Like he was a simple man. Even if people gave him clothes, he would then donate them to somebody else. Like he'd walk around barefoot and plant apple trees, but he was doing it some to make money too. Like he had experience in doing this, so people would get that land from the government, get some of that money, and then he would come in and help them plant all of their orchards, and then maybe even come back and check on it a little bit every now and then. And he ended up growing a lot of orchards of his own. He died with like over 1,000 acres of property.
Wow. So overall, for his time, he was a pretty cool dude. Yeah.
And the fact that he was a vegan in that time was really interesting as well. It was just, in a time when most other people were not that way. He was a very interesting person to write about.
And speaking of like apple orchards, I don't know, I'm going to veer off here. So in my neighborhood, started in 1990, right? This development. It used to be all apple trees. It was a apple farm, right? Apple orchards everywhere. You can see not a one now stands, of course. And now I got to pay like $5 for a pound for apples at a store. Isn't that kind of, I don't know, man. I feel kind of cheated on that point, because I'll eat the hell out of some Honeycrisp apples, but I got to pay the price though. Had I had my apple orchard here, I think I'd be better off.
In Indiana, I imagine they're still there. No, I haven't been, for the last 20 or 30 years hardly. But when I was growing up, there were still apple orchards in Indiana besides the farms. We'd have farms. Most of the farms would be like corn or wheat or soy, but there was apple orchard. When I was 9, I actually got to work. You'd work at the apple orchards during the summer to take the apples down. You'd put a big bag around you, and then you go up. it was mostly teenagers that were doing it, but most were like 16. So they'd always make at least twice as much money as me because they were much bigger and they could hold a lot.
Yeah.
I'd have to come down and go back, but it was fun work actually. I mean, you're going up and climbing up trees and taking down apples and stuff. So you take them all down for the farmer. And I only did that 1 year when I was 9, but like I said, I was much younger than all the other workers. I wanted to. It wasn't like a child abuse thing. My brother and sister who were older were doing it, and I
Right.
wanted to do it. And you made any money you make when you're 9 is like great money.
Oh yeah, I remember when I used to get every once in a while. Grandma and Grandpa used to visit, give you like $5 bill. You're like, oh, I struck it rich. So
Right.
whatever you can do to get that extra money and spend it, that's great. Now, before we go, I can't let this one pass because I know you write about a lot of things. A lot of it is fun. A lot of it is biographies, and because you have vampires as well, a cookbook. But I just saw this, and I'm trying not to laugh as you were talking. So now I can. Toilet paper man.
that was my one attempt at a superhero book, and that's where you notice most of my books I will not say one and give up. I wrote that. It's not bad, it's not great. I realized, I was not one, I would admit, I'm not one that grew up reading comics. I have nothing against comics. I think they're great. Anything that people read, I think is great. And I love all the comic movies. But so I thought I've got to make an attempt at writing a comic book. Basically, he was a nanotechnology expert doing an experiment with cleaning products that exploded, and somehow the nanobots fused with him, and he became Toilet Paper Man. And went out to clean up the city.
I mean, he serves a purpose, and everybody's better for it.
It taught me that maybe as much as I do have a wide range that I'm good at, I'm not quite sure that superhero books are necessarily my strong point.
No, I mean, it looks like it's a lot of fun to read, and it's okay to have fun every once in a while. We could be serious, but every once in a while, let your hair down a little bit and just write something fun, right?
Right. Yeah. If I enjoy it much more when I do. Like I said, I like to try to push different boundaries, try to write different ways, try to write about different things. Hopefully, definitely, I have a wide range of readers. Not every reader will like every book I do because they are of so many different genres. But for me, it helps keep it fresh and keep me excited about continuing the journey.
And it will now being that you're south of the border, living there currently. Are you doing any events or conventions or author cons or anything like that? I would imagine the traveling would be kind of hard to do that, especially where you're located.
Yeah, no, it's very hard. I generally just stay home in Puerto Vallarta. I haven't done any book events yet. This is my second interview, so I'm excited about that. And one thing that makes it particularly hard, every now and then I get a really passionate fan, and I know because they said thank you a whole bunch of times, like they're truly a passionate fan, and they ask me, can you give me an autographed copy? And so to do that, I have to order the book myself, which in Mexico usually costs about $10 or $15 more than it does in the US just to ship it, whatever the case is, to get it to me. And then when I get the book, I have to send it back, and that usually costs me like $50 to $75. So by the time I've sent somebody a signed copy of one of my books, it's like $125. Whereas if I was in the US, I could probably order it at the price on Amazon and then ship it for much, much cheaper. It would be an easier, it's the difficulty of living in another country, I guess.
Yeah, for that. So now there's any of my business, so forgive the question. Are you going to plan on retiring there? Or are you moving back to the United States?
Oh no, I've lived here for about 25 years now.
Wow.
Both my children are Mexican. They were born in Mexico. They've been raised in Mexico. So I'm very. My wife is Mexican, so I guess that's really what happened. I came on vacation to Mexico, met a nice Mexican lady, and got married, and now we have 2 children who are now in university, and I'm still here.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful love story, my friend, and that's fantastic. And now for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to learn more about you, your books, and where they can get them, how can they find out?
One of the best places to go is SamuelDenHartog.com. That's Samuel. My last name is DenHartog. On my Facebook page at facebook.com, Samuel DenHartog author, is also a great place because, like I said, every Sunday, sometimes more frequently, but every Sunday minimum, I have at least one book free, sometimes more than one. So that's a place. And then all my books are only available on Amazon. So you can also search for my author name on Amazon and find my books there.
Excellent. And I'll put all the links and descriptions of the books and your sites on the show page. Not only that, but we'll put it on your social media. Yeah, well, once their episode's released, it'll be right there for them to click and they'll go. So, and I know that you're trying to reach that goal. I'd love to bring you back later this year because I know you have at least 2 or 3 more books coming out. And let's talk about those and let's see where your journey is at that point.
Okay, maybe when I have 3 more done at least, I'll send you an email.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, my friend. Thank you.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.